So that part, in terms of mental model, 100% there with you. I think the challenge that I face in number one, synchronicity is something that has both time and space. It doesn't happen like that right away. Something I encounter something and then in some uncertain time, some desired outcome happen. So that in itself makes it even more complicated. Now all of a sudden you have a multifactorial equation here, right?
Yeah.
So as a scientist who is trying to look at this as a theory, as a systems theory point of view, how do you quantify and measure in this thing that's so subjective? You know what I mean?
Right.
How do you help others to quote unquote duplicate? Because if it's not duplicatable, it's not really science. So you're in a paradox here. So I'm curious to know how you go about solving
as
this.
you said, synchronicity is about time and space. And time and space is the realm of physics. What's beautiful about physics is that when you first start taking physics classes when you're younger, you learn about time and space. It's the first thing you study. And then you do all this stuff over many years, you get your degrees. And then the most advanced people working on stuff are working on time and space. They're still trying to understand what time and space really are, because we can take them for granted and we can build theories from them. We can know how acceleration works relative to time and space. But we actually still haven't fully identified what time and space are. And Newton had this idea that time was this unaffectable just chain, like the passage through time is unchanging. It just is what it is. And Einstein came along and said, the faster you go and the relative speeds make a difference in the flow of time. So we've evolved our understanding of time, but we still have a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of things about it that don't quite make sense. We live in the moment. We don't have access to even 10 minutes from now, and we can remember 10 minutes ago, but we can have access to what's 10 feet to our right or to our left. So distance is different from time in that regard. We're stuck at one place in time that we call the present. So time and space are the study of physics, and synchronicities are only meaningful because they happen at the right time. I bumped into my good friend while I was traveling in Europe. This is a story I tell on my YouTube channel if anybody wants to listen to the whole thing. And we had been planning to meet in Greece, but I got sick and had to adjust my plans and spontaneously went home through Paris to catch a flight home to California. And in Paris, she got diverted too and ended up going to Paris, and we met at the Louvre Museum by accident. And this is not just anybody. This is a person that ended up going on to become my wife. The question is, did we meet at that time and space on purpose, or how does it work? That particular moment, at that particular time, we were in the same place. So my work is to study how things come together at the right time and place. The way that we can quantify that is through this model that's one of the simplest models in quantum mechanics of many worlds. Now, people might be familiar with the many worlds theory of quantum mechanics and think about it. There are many versions of you in the world or in the multiverse, and that's not the right way to think about it, in my view.
Oh, interesting. Okay, please elaborate.
The quantum mechanical wave function. The wave function is this thing in science that describes all the things you could possibly know about a system. So we don't actually know what an electron is. We know that it has a wave function that we can describe it with. And if we want to know the spin, or if we want to know the mass, or if we want to know the position of the electron, we can measure it from the wave function. And it gives us the right answer. We still don't know what it is exactly, but it's this intermediate state between if there's nothing, there's nothing there. If there's actually an electron there, then there's actually an electron. But there's this intermediate state of, okay, there's a wave function, we can query it and get a result, and then we'll get something real. But it's not actually quite real in the same sense. So what the wave function does is it's constantly evolving into possibilities, branching like a tree. So if you think about a wave function as this branching tree, I usually use an apple tree as a metaphor. And you can measure, for instance, let's say you have 10 branches on this tree, 10 ways that things could go. And let's say 2 of those are really meaningful. 2 of those lead to some kind of experience you're seeking to have. Let's say I'm traveling in Europe and I'm going through Paris to get home, and 2 of the branches lead to me bumping into Dana. One of them's at the Louvre, but another one might be at a cafe. So there's these 2 branches that lead to us having that experience, and there's 8 other branches that lead to us having a different experience, like with not meeting. Then you can quantify that. You can say out of the 10 possibilities, 2 of them were meaningful and 8 of them were not. So you got a 20% sort of weight factor pulling on those branches. And I weigh those, I mark that out with an apple. So you put apples on the branches that have that meaningful experience, and suddenly you're able to quantify the likelihood of that situation, that experience over a different situation. Noting that the experience had to do with us meeting, not specifically at the Louvre, but in some form, because it was the internal experience I wanted to have of us talking and sharing time together and developing a relationship. That's the important thing we're after when we talk about synchronicity, not the physical circumstances themselves, and this is why it's hard in science, because in science, what we measure and what we are controlled experiments. We control a variable, we repeat it under that same control to get the measurement. With synchronicity, what you're controlling is the meaning of the circumstance, the experience that somebody's having. And so the situation is going to show up differently every single time. You don't know if you're going to bump into someone at the Louvre or at a cafe or at the train station. You can't predict that at all. And so this is why it comes into flow, because in flow, we're not predicting the world. We're not controlling the world. We're coming into alignment with the circumstances that we have and finding ourselves surprised, but pleasantly surprised by the types of opportunities that come to us.